Hello friends. Before we begin, an important note, this story I will tell today is not for the faint of heart. There will be a lot of psychological pressure here, and it touches on topics that may cause discomfort. Therefore, 18 plus, and listen further only at your own risk. Have you ever wondered how well you really know the people who live just beyond the wall from you? We exchange hellos in the elevator, maybe borrow some salt, but what do we actually know about their real lives? Nothing. We live in a world where isolation has become the norm, and the darkest secrets are hidden not in the forest, but in ordinary apartments. My story happened to me about 5 years ago. At the time, I was living in an old but solid building in the city center, a classic Stalin-era apartment block with high ceilings and thick walls. My apartment was on the 4th floor, and above my head, on the 5th, lived them. Neighbors no one had ever seen. Apartment number 42 on the 5th floor had stood empty for a long time. Everyone knew the owner had died and the heirs were arguing over the property. And then, one morning, an old, beat-up van appeared by the entrance. There were no movers, no furniture, just a few battered boxes carried inside by a single man who looked like a shadow. I didn't see his face, only his back, tall, thin, wearing an old coat even though it was July. I thought, okay, a weirdo, but who among us isn't? But the following week, the strange things began. 1. The sounds. They were nothing like ordinary household noise. No music, no arguments, no footsteps. There was tapping. Dull, rhythmic tapping, as if someone were knocking on concrete or wood. And it always started at exactly 3:17 a.m. and lasted until dawn. Not loud, but distinct enough to wake you up. 2. The schedule. I quickly realized that these neighbors lived on a completely opposite schedule. I never heard them during the day. Not once. But at night. At night they were active. Yet their activity made no sense. No sounds of running water or a TV. Just the tapping, the quiet, inexplicable dragging of something across the floor, and sometimes, whispering. The narrator lowers his voice to a whisper. A soft, rapid whisper, as if someone were reciting a prayer or instructions. I tried going upstairs. I rang the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence. Absolute, dead silence. I felt that someone was there, but no one answered. They didn't even move. That was the first thing that truly started to scare me. They didn't respond even when I knocked with my fist. I started asking around. It's a classic thing. Grandma Helia from the 3rd floor always knows everything. But even she was surprised. 1. Neighbors' testimonies. Grandma Helia. They never use the elevator. I've never seen them take out the trash. It's always clean. A young couple from the 2nd floor. We thought the apartment was still empty. No sounds at all, except a strange smell that sometimes comes from the ventilation. 2. The smell. Yes, the smell. I started noticing it too. The smell of an old, damp cellar and something metallic. It was faint but sharp, and it appeared after 4 a.m., when the tapping stopped. I decided to try making contact again. I left a note. Hello? I'm your downstairs neighbor. Is everything okay with you? If you need anything, knock. I slid it under the door. The next day, the note was gone. That meant it had been taken. I felt relieved. Maybe they were just withdrawn introverts. But that relief vanished when I saw it returned. The note was lying on the doormat by my door, rolled into a perfect, even cylinder. And on the back, written in pencil in a single, neat, calligraphic hand, were the words. Silence is the best neighbor. Do not disturb it. That was the turning point. It wasn't just, do not bother. It was a threat. They knew who I was. They waited until I came back. They were watching. Yet I still hadn't seen them. Who were they? A family? A cult? Just madmen? The police wouldn't do anything. Sir, this is private property. There are no signs of a crime. They're simply not opening the door. I'd be labeled paranoid. But I knew that behind that door, something bad was happening. Something that produced that smell and that eerie whispering. 2 weeks later, I made a decision. I had to find out. Friday night. 2:45. I put on dark clothes, took a flashlight, wrapped in cloth to dim the light, and a knife, just in case. I went out. The stairwell was dark and silent. I climbed to the 5th floor. The corridor looked different. Near door number 42 there wasn't a speck of dust, not a bit of trash. The door was old, metal, without a peephole. Even the handle looked polished, as if it were touched constantly. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. But then I heard it, breathing. It was uneven, deep, as if someone were sleeping after exhausting work. And it was very close. The feeling that someone was sleeping right behind the door, not somewhere inside the room. I began to look around. I noticed fresh traces of sealant around the doorframe, as if they had sealed the door from the inside. And then I saw what made my blood run cold. Through the gap between the floor and the door, something was seeping out, water. But it wasn't just water. It was thick, dark, and it was moving. Slowly. I shone my flashlight on the dark liquid. It was a reddish-brown color, like used motor oil, but there was something wrong about it. I quickly pulled out my phone and took a picture. And at that very moment, the breathing behind the door stopped. Then a sound came from behind the door. Not knocking, not a scream. It was the sound of something heavy and flexible moving across a wooden floor. It was getting closer. Slowly, heavily. And this sound had no limbs. It was like a sack filled with sand being dragged. I ran. I took the stairs 2 at a time and didn't stop until I was in my apartment, locking the door with every lock. I didn't sleep until morning. At 7 a.m., I called the police. I showed them the photo, the dark, thick liquid. I told them about the smell, about the round-the-clock isolation, about the sealed door. I sounded like a madman, but they agreed to come. When the officers arrived, they smelled it themselves. They knocked. No one answered. They used their key, or something like it, to break the sealant and open the door. I stayed downstairs, on the stairs. I heard 2 officers go in. And then, complete, deafening silence. A minute later, I heard a voice. It was a scream, but very quiet, muffled. Officer 1, breathing hard. My God! Get out! Call a special unit. Immediately. This isn't what we thought. I went upstairs. A 3rd officer was waiting for me. He didn't let me go any farther. But he couldn't hide what he had seen. His face was white as a wall. The official version was a neighbor who was a collector and had died. An accident. The body was found in a state of decomposition. All the strange sounds were caused by falling objects and the processes of decomposition. A lie. Here's what I later learned from an acquaintance who worked at the morgue and took part in the evacuation. There wasn't just one body. There were 4. A man, a woman, and 2 children. They hadn't died recently. Their condition indicated that they had been dead for at least 9 to 10 months. Which means they were already dead when I first heard the knocking. The doors had been sealed from the inside not with sealant, but with wax and their own blood. The collection wasn't antiques. It was hundreds, maybe thousands, of drawings on the walls. Pencil drawings depicting only one thing: a sleeping person surrounded by dark, invisible entities. The most terrifying part, in the kitchen, where the liquid had been seeping from the floor, they found a perfectly clean, washed plate. Someone, or something, hadn't just lived there. It maintained the illusion of life, using dead bodies as scenery. Someone was knocking. Someone was whispering. Someone took my note. And when the police arrived, that something simply disappeared. The apartment was sealed. A year later, it was sold. No one dared to move in. I moved out myself a month later. I couldn't sleep in that room anymore. Neighbors no one had ever seen. This story taught me one thing: Lonely people who shut themselves off from the world are not the greatest danger. The greatest danger is when someone else shuts them in and pretends they're still there. Was it some kind of invisible entity? Was it a wild, inhuman mind that lingered in the body of a dead person? Or was it one of the family members who simply went mad and started playing the role of a family until they died as well? I don't know. But I know what I saw and heard. And I know that silence is not always a sign of peace. Sometimes it's a sign that the thing living behind the wall is simply waiting for you to listen. And what about you? Is there an apartment in your building from which you've never heard a single sound? Write in the comments what you think was really happening in apartment 42. And do you believe that someone could imitate the lives of the dead? If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next horrors. Until next time, and be careful with your neighbors.